Hello, North Central Washington, and welcome to Networked. I'm your host, Jenny Rojanasatian, and it is my pleasure to be on air with you today. If you have not tuned into our show before, this is a variety program hosted by our nonprofit, NCW Tech Alliance. NCW Tech Alliance is a 501c3 passionate about connecting people and technology resources to ensure rural communities are not left behind as technology accelerates. We do programming and technology, entrepreneurship, and STEM education, and offer year-round programs, events, and resources. You can learn all about our nonprofit at our website, ncwtech.org, and of course by tuning in here to the NCW Life channel, where every week I have the opportunity to interview different people from our region who are making huge impacts. I'm very excited to have on air today Steve Maher, who's the coordinator at Our Valley, Our Future, to talk about their visioning plan and what's ahead for the Our Valley, Our Future team. Don't go too far. We'll be right back here on the NCW Life channel. And welcome back to Networked. I'm your host, Jenny Rojanasatian, and I am on air with our guest today, Steve Maher for Our Valley, Our Future. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
I can't believe you've not been on the show. But the last couple of years have been very busy. I know, exactly. So I'm so excited that we got to sit down today because at NCW Tech Alliance and Our Valley, Our Future have been doing a lot of work side by side the last few years. Yep. And so you're just been a great partner to our organization. For those who may not be familiar with you though, Steve, and your background, I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
So I've lived in Wenatchee now for about 25, 26 years. Grew up in Portland, Oregon, University of Oregon, graduated. And I came here originally for a job at the Wenatchee World, in which I stayed for about 18 of those 25 or 26 years. Yeah. I was a reporter and editor there. Got to know the community very well when you do that kind of work.
Absolutely.
You kind of get every slices of the community. You talk to everybody. And so that helped me. And when I went off on my own, started a project management business / communications that served me really well. And I was able to start doing things. One of the big first things I did was work with the Chelan-Douglas Land Trust on their big, $9 million fundraising campaign for the Foothills trails and the Foothills lands. And so did that. And then about 7 years ago, got involved with Our Valley, Our Future, and been doing that ever since. And then I've got Run Wenatchee, I've got Art on the Avenues, I've got, I serve on the Visit Chelan County board now. And so I've kind of a lot of different places.
I was going to say, you've worn a lot of hats. And I think we first met probably back in 2013, 2014 because of Run Wenatchee. Such an incredible program. For those who may not be familiar, I'd love to give a little plug to Run Wenatchee. What is Run Wenatchee?
It's basically a running club, for all intents and purposes. And we do a weekly run club event out of Pybus and races and events. And then we also occasionally do things like where we bring speakers in, to talk about running. So it's a way to bring the running community together.
I love that. And it's free. You can just go check down at Pybus and run on the loop. And
or check in online.
I'll check in online too. Awesome. Really cool. Well, I know we're here to talk about Our Valley, Our Future, so we'll kind of pivot over to that. Our Valley, Our Future has been doing some incredible work in our community since 2015. And you really have been there since the very beginning. If people aren't familiar, though, tell us a little bit about the organization and what is its purpose.
It's a really fascinating, our mission, our goals, and what we do. It's we're officially a nonprofit. Okay. We consider ourselves very independent, very much nonpartisan, which I think allows us to do the kind of work we do, which is bringing people together, organizations together to develop a common vision for the future and then to plan for that future. And so our guiding document is this action plan. We have a 5-year action plan, and all of this that is in this action plan, various projects and programs and initiatives, originally came from people here. They told us this is what we need to be better and to improve the quality of life. So that's the main thing we do. But a part of that, we do convening, facilitating, organizing, of course, planning, communicating, data collection, all that kind of is part of this stuff. Yeah.
And walking back to the very beginning in 2015, 2016, there was a competition and some grants that kind of helped launch this process, right?
Yeah, and it was, officially Our Valley, Our Future got going in 2015. We trace our beginnings, though, to a TEDx conference that happened here in late 2014. And that TEDx conference, which was put on by Sarah Rolfs and some others, focused on, I think the theme was connecting the dots, And so there was a group of folks who were local officials, mostly economic development types, who had been meeting for coffee, and they went to this TEDx conference, came out of it super fired up because what they'd been talking about, which was bringing folks together, getting organizations and people out of their silos, connecting the dots, was exactly what this TEDx conference ended up being about. So by early 2015, they had decided we're got to do something. About the same time, the United Way here found out about a contest that was called America's Best Communities Contest. And basically it was a nationwide thing. Communities could submit proposals about stuff they were working on to better their community. And they decided to submit an application in this over a period of about, I'd say 6-8 months. They ended up, they first became a quarterfinalist, first became one of 50 communities chosen, then it became a quarterfinalist, finally a semifinalist. And that's as far as we went. But through that process, we ended up raising about $100,000, and that served as the seed money to really get Our Valley, Our Future off the ground.
And, like most initiatives, especially born from nonprofit, usually takes that grant or community support to start to lift. I think one of the things to me has been really leading edge with Our Valley, Our Future is breaking down those barriers, especially when you think about government or education, which have a lot of physical geographic restrictions.
Definitely.
Right. So obviously certain cities are supposed to only really be supporting that city. So it's hard to look at the whole ecosystem.
Yeah. And that was, we live in an incredible place. However, we do have the Columbia River coming down through the middle of at least the greater Wenatchee area and separating the 2 counties and 2 cities and 2 school districts and on and on. And you've got to respect jurisdictions, by law, they're a jurisdiction, right? But for all intents and purposes, we are one community. And that's something that Our Valley, Our Future works on really hard, trying to bring folks together, work on these projects. In our new action plan, which just came out, 2 or 3 months ago, when you look at the lead and supporting partners, it's reflected that way. We've got a project or program and initiative, and because, again, the river separates these jurisdictions, you've got to have everybody coming together if it's really going to be a regional thing.
Well, we function as one community, right? You might live in East Wenatchee and work in Wenatchee. You might be a Wenatchee resident and do all your shopping on the other side. If you're a tourist, you have no idea that these are 2 separate cities and 2 separate government bases. And so having that collective vision for what we want, I think, is so important. And Our Valley was really has been the leader and trying to convene those conversations.
And always kind of keep it in front of people. You've got to do that. Because if you're not, people will, I think human nature tendency is to kind of revert back. One of the other things that we did early on is we've developed a planning model that it's interesting because, you've got to have elected officials and community leaders involved. But sort of the secret sauce to what we've done is we talk a lot about going to the grassroots and talking to people here and finding out, with in-depth surveys and focus groups and really figuring out what they, first of all, value, that they want to retain, what they see as, the region's, greatest strengths, greatest weaknesses, challenges, that they personally are facing, but also as their own community. And then to ask them about how do we fix these things, or how do we solve them, or how do we make them better? And then to take that information and really craft the projects and programs around that information. I mean, you've got to have community leaders and elected officials involved because ultimately,
They're helping make those decisions.
Yes.
Yeah.
They make the decisions ultimately, usually, right? And they also are the ones who've got the funding and, et cetera, and they've got the horsepower to do things. But it's and you've got to have that mix. But I think that's one of the things that's really made what we've done successful is that we've gone to the grassroots.
Another thing that you've done, I think, really well is reach out to our Latino and Latinx community. Let's talk a little bit about that through the survey work and your initiatives there.
Yeah, so we this was prior to the pandemic, of course. We've always been concerned about that because we feel that if we're going to have a plan for the community, it's got to be for everybody, and it's got to be representative of that, and also reflect what they want, right? And so, both in our first action plan and our second action plan, the outreach work we did in both of those. The first one was back in 2015, 2016. We had, and I'm thinking off the top of my head here, but about 23% of those who participate self-identified as Latino. The second time, it rose to about 27%. I don't know of another planning or community effort that has seen such involvement from the Latino community. And as folks go through our action plan, they will see that that's reflected, that we really did talk to folks and really, have things that they're going to make things better. And so it's really important to us. Also on our board, organizationally, we have several Latino community leaders on our board, and that was something else that we did because we need that input, and our board truly needs to reflect the community as well. So it's one of the things I'm really proud of having done that and making sure it happens. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's not easy. Outreach work is hard, and particularly when you're talking to folks, some of them who don't know English. One of the really cool things we did in crafting the new action plan, and this was the help of Arque Petrinos, Teresa Bendito, and some others, was in 2021, I want to say it was about May of 2021, so COVID numbers had gone down. We felt it was safe to kind of gather again, and so we held, we called them focus groups, but we held 3 focus group sessions on 3 consecutive Friday nights outside at Met Howe Park, and we had about 150 mostly Spanish speakers show up at those, and we had music and we had food, and people would gather on each of those Friday nights, and we'd kind of eat and talk a little bit, and then everybody went and divided into different picnic tables, and we had note takers and we had translators, and it was remarkable. And I thought later, we should have had a film crew because it was amazing, and so that's the kind of stuff we do.
Well, kudos to you, because I think, our community has, talking about silos, right? It's been siloed apart. And I know that a lot of nonprofits and leaders have been looking and saying, we don't have enough representation here. When you look at our schools, some of them have over 50% identify as Latinx or Hispanic. And so why aren't it's not reflected in leadership and visioning? And so kudos to you for really leaning in and making that a priority. We'll talk more about priorities. We have to head to a commercial break here. So don't go too far. We'll be back on air with Steve Maher. And welcome back to Networked. We have been visiting with Steve Maher from Our Valley, Our Future. Talked a lot about the history of our valley and really how you're breaking down those silos for community visioning. You just recently finished the first 5-year action plan. Let's talk a little bit about what is that? When I say action plan, what does that mean? And then I'd love to dive into the numbers and action plan number 2. Yeah.
So, we just went through our first 5-year action plan. It expired, I guess, into 2021. We were working really hard in 2021 on the new 5-year action plan, which just came out a couple months ago or so. And really looking forward to that. There was a lot of work that went into that. It was pretty difficult because we did it mostly during the pandemic, right? And but we still had more than a couple thousand people participate, so that was really good.
And doing those events like with Parque Perginos that you mentioned, and again getting more feedback from community members to inform the next 5-year action
We had to be
plan.
nimble, and we were pretty innovative. We did virtual focus groups in many of the communities outside the greater Wenatchee area, and had amazing attendance at these. And it was really quite heartening to hear and see people show up like that.
Yeah.
We did things in Spanish. Just a lot of interesting things we did during the pandemic.
So let's go through kind of maybe the action plan by the numbers. Yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
So there's a lot of work that goes into something like this. It was about a 16-month process from when we began to when the action plan was actually distributed, and had, again, more than 2,000 people answer a series of questions. And these questions are really important because they kind of frame the entire plan, and they frame ultimately what ends up in it. And again, it's questions like, what do you value most? What are the core values here that you want to retain? What do you see that's working really well here right now? What do you see that needs to be improved? What concerns do you have? And then finally, we asked folks for ideas, for both big ideas and small ideas on how to make things better, and then take that information. We then appointed 6 action teams.
Okay.
And these were folks, each action team was based on a focus area. And these were folks who were either experts in that field or had a really strong interest. It was a mix of, kind of community members and community leaders. And those folks met for, I think it was like 6 meetings over a 2-month period in fall of 2021. They poured a lot of time into this, and they were the ones who took what we heard from the community members, the overall public, and ended up coming up with descriptions for individual projects, programs, and initiatives that ended up in the plan.
Kind of glean down that information into what would become the action plan.
And so when the plan came out, and again, 2 or 3 months ago, there's 6 focus areas, which is something else that's different from a lot of communities will do visioning, planning work, and they typically focus on the economy, jobs, maybe housing, and that's it. Ours is very much whole of community planning, so it has those things, but it also has, the environment, outdoor recreation, education, arts and culture, healthcare, public safety, even governance is in there. And so, and each of these are spread out in 6 focus areas. We ended up with a total of 86 individual action items and projects. We have 9 what we call game changer initiatives, which are bigger projects that are multi-year typically, that will move the needle significantly in the community. Anyway, it's a lot of work. It's quite rewarding when you get into this, but from start to finish takes a long time.
Now let's talk about the collective impact like, what does that mean in the model around this?
Since the very beginning, going back to 2015, our Value Our Future has adhered to what we call the collective impact model, and it's enough. If you go to academia, or you'll find the specific description there. The best way I can describe this, I use the analogy of a sports team, whether it's pro or college or high school. They have everybody's on a sports team has a role, whether it's the coach. Individual players have their own roles. You even have, team managers and administrators, and everybody has a role, and they're all shooting for that common goal, which is, maybe win a big championship, maybe win a division title, maybe just improve as a team. But there's that goal. Everybody's role is understood, and everybody kind of moves together as one. And that's what collective impact is. And so in the action plan overall, there's collective impact. And then when you look at the focus areas and the individual game changer initiatives and projects and programs in the plan, you will see that to get these things moving and to gain traction, you've got to have collective impact. You've got to have different parts to do that. And particularly here, again, going back to what we were talking earlier, where we've got the Columbia River coming through, dividing the 2 counties and the 2 cities, you really do need to work together if you want to see these things happen and you want to see the region improve overall.
One of the areas I know that you're focused on is housing in this new action plan, which is something that really is affecting all residents coming into the area, locals. Tell us a little bit about, for example, using that part of the action plan. What are some of the initiatives behind it?
So there is one of the game changers is a regional housing approach, and there's several steps that we've outlined in that. And one of them, we've known that there's been a housing issue here for a while, right? In fact, it's been going on now for 6, 7, 8 years probably. And so one of the steps in there, and this is something our valley did back in 2017, is we just finished a pretty comprehensive housing survey, regional housing survey.
And it goes back to your point earlier of like you've done a lot of data collection, a lot of data collection survey.
And again, because we're nonpartisan, independent, nonprofit, we can do a pretty good job at it. And I think also the results are accepted because, again, for those reasons. And we ended up, we had this survey only open for 2 weeks in May of this year. We had more than 1,500 residents completed. And this was a 29-question survey. Wow. So again, I think just by the numbers tells you a lot about the angst that our community members have about housing right now. And the results were pretty sobering. I think about 90% of the respondents of 1,500, and these were spread across the region, by the way. We had, obviously Wenatchee area had most of them, but we had like 18% of the respondents were from the Upper Valley, and 7% were from the Chelan area. So, but anyway, about 90%, said the fact that we've had a median sale home price increase of 66% over the past 5 years is a problem. Yeah. They see housing as probably the biggest issue that we're facing as a region. 62% of the respondents said that they had considered relocating from their current community at some point over the past 2 years. And considering could be really serious considering, like I'm looking for another place to buy somewhere else, or it could be just the thought enters somebody's mind. But I think that's a huge red flag for our community. 62% of the overall respondents said that. 74% of people between the ages of 18 and 34 said that. And that's even a bigger red flag because, that's our future.
Right.
And if those folks are considering relocating because they can't afford or even find a place to live, that's a problem.
Yeah, we don't want those just entering the workforce, which are so vital for growing jobs in the economy, looking to move outside of the area or not be able to come back home.
Yeah. We also, we provided an opportunity for folks to tell their own personal housing story in the survey. And we had about 350 people took the time to write their own personal housing story. I read through all of them, and it really puts a human face on things. And it also shows you how the economy is being impacted here. People in their stories said, I don't have the money to go eat out at a restaurant. I don't have the money to buy some basic goods and services because they're spending, more than 50% of their income on housing, And then we also had business owners telling us, we can't, including big ones like Confluence Health or Columbia Valley Community Health, telling us that we can't fill positions because, we can get people interested, but they can't find a place to live.
I want to touch just briefly as we're wrapping down here. This is also part of this resiliency that that's been really important. Tell me briefly about that.
So when we did our outreach work in 2021, we heard a lot about resiliency, and this applies to a lot of different things. It isn't just healthcare. It's housing. It's
Since 1999, NCW Tech Alliance has served as our regional hub for technology innovation. As a 501c3, their nonprofit mission is to connect people and technology resources to create a thriving community. You can network with the team and guests from today's show by visiting them at www.ncwtech.org.